Okay, guys, I got a serious update for you. You heard me talk about SEMA and the product roadmap radar. I just caught up with Matt, who's the founder there, and he gave me the latest on what they are building. And my mind is blown. The team at SEMA are taking things to the next level. Built around the core of the product roadmap radar, i.e. code and JIRA analysis, they are building agent orchestration across the product lifecycle. Picture this. You hook up this system same as before, i.e. integrate your repository and your backlog, JIRA today. From that point, SEMA's agent analyzes the codebase and makes suggestions as to what needs to be done next and what could improve, optimize the product. Then, if those tasks are routine, the agent assigns the task to a coding agent, think something like Devin, to complete the minutia, while assigning the human-in-the-loop task to engineers themselves. What you end up with is engineers focusing on building core competency features while AI handles all the rest. If you're not salivating right now, I don't think you fully understand what this means. But here's what I would suggest. Right now, their product is in a closed beta, and SEMA is looking for folks to sign up for their Product Intelligence Advisory Board. This gives you the opportunity to use the product, give feedback, help shape the future of what's built. Oh, and not to mention additional free usage of the product potentially through the end of 2026. So, if that fits your workflow and toolset, you need to reach out today. Go to codestory.co/nextlevel, NEXTLEVEL, and reach out to Matt at SEMA to learn more and join the Product Intelligence Advisory Board. Again, that's codestory.co/nextlevel. This episode is sponsored by Postman. Postman is the world's leading API platform, trusted by 98% of the Fortune 500 and over 40 million developers. Tap into APIs from 18,000 plus companies to power agents that make smarter decisions. Learn more at postman.com/podcast/codestory. This message is sponsored by Melee Search. Today, search isn't just a feature, it's a cornerstone. And Melee Search gives your users the experience they need with lightning-fast performance, full-text search, AI usage, and multimodal capabilities. Melee Search delivers relevant results in less than the blink of an eye. Use the promo code CODESTORY at checkout to get 2 months free at meleesearch.com. That's MEILI search.com. This episode is brought to you by Paddle. Don't settle for less when you can have more, MOR, with Paddle, your merchant of record. Eliminate the headaches of payments, grow your revenue everywhere, and focus on what you do best, building your product. Get more revenue with less hassle at paddle.com. This episode is brought to you by PropelOff. People take authentication for granted, but it's more than how customers log into your product. It's how you manage your relationship with your users. The easiest way to make authentication your advantage is to use PropelOff. PropelOff is more than just functional. It's powerful. With tools like Managed UIs, Enterprise SSO, robust user management features, and actionable insights, PropelOff adapts as your product grows. And the best part? When auth is effortless, your team can focus on scaling, not troubleshooting. That means more releases, happier customers, and more growth for your business. Save dev time, win over your customers, and propel your business forward with PropelOff. Check them out at propeloff.com. That's PROPELAUTH.com.
When I think about the rail industry, which many of us feel very nostalgic about, and it's ripe with these opportunities, whether it's inspection technologies or automating the movement of trains, I think that's a privilege to be a part of that, to say, I think that these solutions can make that environment safer and more efficient. And if you can take a step and have a big part of moving that forward, we're in a very interesting time where technology is moving fast, and I think we have a great opportunity to do that. My name's Alan Fisher, and I'm the Group Vice President for Logistics, Analytics, and Digital Mine, which includes our kinetics inspection technologies at Wabtec Corporation.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries.
Spent 6 months moonlighting.
There's nothing on the back end.
Who share what it takes to change an industry.
I don't exactly know what to do next.
Took many goes to get right.
Who built the teams that have their back.
A company is its people.
The teams help each other achieve more.
Most proud of our team.
Keeping scalability top of mind.
all that infrastructure was a
Yes,
pain.
we've been fighting it as we grow.
Total waste of time. The stories you don't read in the headlines.
It's not an easy thing to achieve, mind
Took it
you.
off the shelf and dusted it off and tried it again.
To ride the ups and downs of the startup life.
You need to really want
It's
it.
not just about technology.
All this and more on Code Story.
I'm your host, Noah Labhart, and today how Alan Fisher and the Wabtec team have brought forth railroad inspection tech to automate asset tracking in the terminals and the yards. Alan Fisher started his career as a computer programmer. Early on, he was hired by the first or second largest freight railroad in the world, Union Pacific. He describes their technology group as having a punk rock spirit, leaning towards building their own solutions over buying them, which he found great value in. But outside of tech, he has been married for 30 years and has 3 kids. He's an avid runner, landing someplace between a marathon runner and a mile in the morning kind of guy. He also loves to read the classics, drawing inspiration from them, along with restoring old homes. Given his rich history in the rail industry, Alan has led the charge in growth and innovation, and most recently, logistics, analytics, and digital mine. As his company started to look to the future and how to solve the industry's most pressing problems, his team executed the acquisition of a portfolio of companies and products, driven by automated inspection. This is the creation story of the Kinetics portfolio at Wabtec Corporation.
Wabtec is a company who delivers solutions primarily to rail, but we also offer to other modes of transportation. Within the Wabtec portfolio, a good portion of our business is what we call digital solutions. And so that can span from anything from fuel management systems for locomotives to the Kinetics portfolio, which is a set of inspection technologies that inspect trains as they go along the track. The portfolio of solutions that Wabtec brings to the table is incredibly unique and powerful, both in terms of the savings that it offers to our customers, what we bring to the table in terms of improved safety, but also we offer a unique set of technologies. Again, if you go back to the locomotive example, we have technologies that are effectively the braking system for a locomotive, an intelligent braking system, and also at the same time that fuel management system. You wouldn't be wrong to think of that as the gas pedal for the locomotive, even though a locomotive does not have a gas pedal. That brings some unique opportunities, cross-product families for us to think about things like making that locomotive more automated, more efficient in terms of its fuel usage, and certainly a safer product line. As it relates to Kinetics, the general thesis here, and if you've ever stood along a track as a freight train goes by, I think most people understand the physics that are involved and the mass that's moving, but you don't really get it until you're standing trackside and you see what is actually taking place there. When you see rail that actually is flexing as that train is going by, you get an appreciation. And you also get an appreciation for when things go south and equipment breaks, what the impacts of that can be, both in terms of the employees in that locomotive, the surrounding communities, the infrastructure around it. It can be quite devastating. And so Kinetics is a suite of technologies that are aimed at inspecting those trains as they go by and looking for defects, some of which could be catastrophic. Others fall in the form of what I would describe as automating maintenance and inspection or predictive maintenance. And so Wabtec's journey there, our first suite of technologies around this were mostly what I would describe in the form of mechanical sensors and solutions. And at this time, we didn't call it inspection technologies. And so those feel like arrays of microphones that are trackside and they're listening for bearings that are going bad, which ultimately can lead to derailment conditions. There similarly are sensors that sit trackside that are what you could think of as strain gauges that are basically looking for wheels that are out of true and are creating this kind of banging environment as a train goes down a track. And so that was our initial foray into the inspection space. Immediate safety benefits, in addition to, if I can predict a derailment and flag the crew that there's some sort of disastrous failure that's bound to occur, it's very powerful in terms of allowing them to take action, remediate that risk, stop the train, and take people out of harm's way. And it also has a benefit to the fluidity of the net.
I'm curious about, I typically ask a question around MVP on this show, and I think it's a little bit different in this case. So I'm curious about maybe the beginning of when kinetics sort of started to come into the picture. What led Wabtec towards this path of starting to pursue this technology? And tell me a little bit about the some of the origination story there of the specific product line.
Earlier, I mentioned the A word and automation, and I want to be really clear on there are benefits to automation that don't necessarily include taking people's jobs away. And those include running a more efficient rail network and running a safer rail network that can be human assisted. So whenever I say automation, I just want to be clear on that because this is such a lightning rod topic. For a significant period of time, part of the vision with the digital solutions at Wabtec has been we have a unique portfolio of technologies that can really automate this industry that I think even the dispassionate viewer would say has been behind the curve on automation. And there's a number of reasons for that. So if you're thinking about bringing automation to rail, naturally, one of the pieces is inspection technologies. And so the germ of this really started with Wabtec acquiring a company that was called Track IQ that was based in Australia and Adelaide that brought to the fore these mechanical solutions that I just described that would be the acoustic detectors as well as what we call a wheel condition monitor that, again, primarily are looking for derailment-causing defects, both on locomotives, but mainly on rail cars. So that was the first piece of the puzzle, and there's really three pieces of the puzzle that we now call kinetics. That first piece came with Track IQ. The second piece that came in the portfolio was when Wabtec acquired a company called Nordco. And what Nordco brought to the table is track inspection solutions. So using ultrasonics to inspect track to look for defects that are not visible. But certainly the number one cause of derailments typically on any railroad is a track failure. And then the third piece, which again, we also acquired here to build out this portfolio, is our vision-based solutions, which is some of our most complicated and most cutting edge, which is using lasers and high-resolution cameras to capture a train as it goes by a portal and to inspect the images that we're capturing and to look for defect cases that, as that train's going by at 60 miles an hour, you can imagine the technical complexities with triggering lasers, lights, and cameras at the perfect moment to capture a very small part on a locomotive or a rail car.
In those suite of products that you mentioned that make up the whole portfolio there, I'm curious about a decision or trade-off you had to work through when choosing each of those pieces to make up the kinetics platform, or maybe one that is holistic. I'll let you decide where you want to take it, but I'm curious about a decision or maybe a trade-off you had to make in going these routes and how you coped with them.
One of the things that you start to learn when you work with technology products within rail is that having a great idea sometimes is not good enough. And railroads, when they buy a product, they have a belief that, hey, I know that it's sitting out there in harsh conditions, but that product has to last for 20 plus years, right? They don't think of putting something in the ground and they'll replace it as frequently as we would replace an iPhone or a MacBook. And ultimately, we decided to acquire Beena Vision, which brought the vision solutions to our portfolio. So that was a real trade-off. And I think on some forms was a bit of an emotional decision because you know this, you speak to founders all the time. There are really great things that were part of those original vision solutions, but the math told us the time to re-engineer that, hey, time to market's really important and we've got to go acquire.
Okay, guys, I got a serious update for you. You heard me talk about SEMA and the product roadmap radar. I just caught up with Matt, who's the founder there, and he gave me the latest on what they are building. And my mind is blown. The team at SEMA are taking things to the next level. Built around the core of the product roadmap radar, i.e. code and Jira analysis, they are building agent orchestration across the product lifecycle. Picture this. You hook up this system same as before, i.e. integrate your repository and your backlog, Jira today. From that point, SEMA's agent analyzes the codebase and makes suggestions as to what needs to be done next and what could improve, optimize the product. Then, if those tasks are routine, the agent assigns the task to a coding agent, think something like Devin, to complete the minutia, while assigning the human-in-the-loop task to engineers themselves. What you end up with is engineers focusing on building core competency features, while AI handles all the rest. If you're not salivating right now, I don't think you fully understand what this means. But here's what I would suggest. Right now, their product is in a closed beta, and SEMA is looking for folks to sign up for their Product Intelligence Advisory Board. This gives you the opportunity to use the product, give feedback, help shape the future of what's built. Oh, and not to mention additional free usage of the product potentially through the end of 2026. So, if that fits your workflow and toolset, you need to reach out today. Go to codestory.co/nextlevel, NEXTLEVEL, and reach out to Matt at SEMA to learn more and join the Product Intelligence Advisory Board. Again, that's codestory.co/nextlevel. This episode is brought to you by Paddle. As a startup, you face unique challenges to stay competitive. You and your team need to stay focused on your product, not your payments. You need to do more, MOR, and DIY less. With Paddle. Paddle is your merchant of record, becoming the seller of record for your SaaS transactions, enabling your team to focus on what's important, your product. Paddle handles all payment management across multiple gateways and methods, taking ownership of tax liability while remaining compliant with regulations across all markets. The platform handles all aspects of SaaS billing, billing models, upgrades, add-on, trials, and more. Let's look at the results. MOR revenue optimization is built into Paddle and accounts for up to 16% higher conversion rates, reduced payment failures, localized pricing, and churn prevention, recovering 40% of cancellations. Their developer-friendly tools are API first with comprehensive documentation, removing the burden from your engineers. With Paddle as your merchant of record, you'll generate more revenue, find and keep more customers, grow faster, and stay compliant everywhere. So what are you waiting for? Get more revenue with less hassle at paddle.com. This episode is sponsored by Fullscale. Let me guess, your team's shipping sprint velocity looks good, but you're still asking yourself, is anyone actually thinking about the why? Matt Watson's been there. He's the founder behind Vin Solutions and Stackify and now runs Fullscale with a 300-plus person dev team. And after 2 decades in the trenches, he's seen the same pattern over and over. Smart developers stuck in systems that reward ticket-taking instead of real thinking. That's why he wrote Product Driven, a playbook for tech leaders who are done babysitting developers and ready to build teams that own the outcome. If you're tired of translating every feature, doing all the thinking, or wondering why your smart team is still stuck, this is the fix. Go to productdriven.com/codestory to grab the book and get the bonus toolkit to help your team shift from output to outcomes, like 12 bold ways to get your retros out of robot mode. Again, that's productdriven.com/codestory. Once you went through the acquisitions and you got the portfolio, alive, and you essentially are going to have to walk forward and figure out, okay, what do we do next, and how do we mature and grow and deploy the product portfolio itself for Kinetics. So I kind of wrap that or liken it to a bit of a roadmap there. How did you put that together, and what sort of criteria are you using to figure out, like, okay, this is the next most important thing to do with Kinetics?
One of the benefits we have at Wabtec is, in addition to providing technologies, we are a locomotive provider. So our relationship with, and as you might guess, there are not thousands and thousands of railroads globally, and the large railroads are all customers of Wabtec. So it's a kind of an interesting model for us in terms of we're very thoughtful about taking our customers' feedback, hearing about their visions. They hire incredibly smart people, and listening to them about what they think is on their, what I would call their operating roadmap. What are the problems that they need to solve? So I think when you think about building out a roadmap, if I was a founder of a B2C business, there's a certain element of, I want to be in a room in a vacuum, and if I have a vision, I need to commit to that vision. When you're developing a product, which, say in North America, there are only 6 customers, you cannot afford to live in that vacuum. You have to have the customer involved with your road mapping process, even at the early stages. So when we had these first Track IQ solutions, I know that we knew, hey, where this is all going is toward the vision-based products. And I had the background of having been at one of those customers and actually building vision solutions instead of procuring those vision solutions. I had that benefit of knowing how strategic and critical they were. And so if you put all that together, it was very obvious that this is where the technology is going. And you're seeing this across many industries, whether it's aerospace or food production. Visual inspection of product is just crucial. So again, there's a lot of inputs into that decision, but when you think about how founders go after new products, rail is this special space where if you think that you're going to invent something and then just drop it on the community, your probability of success is incredibly low.
So with that, when you're executing, you have to have the right team in place, right? And I'm sure there's team stories around people that were brought in with acquisition, but also people that you had to bring in or move around within the company. So I'm curious about how you approach that, and what do you look for in those people to indicate that they're the winning horses to join you in this specific venture?
To me, the essence of running any successful product line is having the right team in place. And I feel every day that that's one of my most critical responsibilities, is making sure that we have the right team in place to hit our goals. We were fortunate enough that in these acquisitions, they came with a lot of incredibly talented people who are very passionate about these spaces. And so in the rail industry, it is an incredibly dense business. Although ostensibly you're like, how hard is this? This is put train on track, go from point A to point B. It is incredibly complicated and takes many years to really understand. So I think one of the things we try to balance is having that internal expertise of people who really understand rail. I would put myself in that category. And then adding the spice to the dish, which is bringing people from other industries who are dealing with similar problems to challenge our thinking. And we have folks on our team, particularly in the vision space, that have come from the automotive industry, from aerospace. And so they bring different thoughts to the table that then we marry with people who have this rail experience. But you use that term like having the right horses. To me, the right horses are, number one, you've got to be smart. You have to know how to operate in a team environment and be humble about that. If I've worked in the automotive industry for 20 years and then I walk into rail, there's a certain amount of humility of, I think I'm really smart, but I don't know anything about rail, so help me explain that. And then, I think most importantly, you've got to be a problem solver, because this is a very dynamic environment, particularly in this space of vision and algorithms and in the world of AI. Things are changing on a daily basis. The science is changing very quickly. And if you're not a problem solver, you're going to have a really hard time with that. And so those are some of the qualities that we look for.
This episode is brought to you by Propel Off. People take authentication for granted, but it's more than how customers log into your product. It's how you manage your relationship with your users. The easiest way to make authentication your advantage is to use Propel Auth. Propel Auth is more than just functional. It's powerful. With tools like Managed UIs, Enterprise SSO, robust user management features, and actionable insights, Propel Auth adapts as your product grows. And the best part? When auth is effortless, your team can focus on scaling, not troubleshooting. That means more releases, happier customers, and more growth for your business. Save dev time, win over your customers, and propel your business forward with Propel Auth. Check them out at propelauth.com. That's propelauth.com. This episode is sponsored by Search. In today's digital landscape, search isn't just a feature, it's a cornerstone, and you need a user experience that drives customer satisfaction. You need Search. Search is lightning-fast performance, returning answers in less than 50 milliseconds. Yeah, you heard that right. Faster than the blink of an eye. The open-source AI search engine is plug-and-play, so you can get up and running in minutes with smart presets, allowing you to start searching through your data with zero configuration. Search utilizes advanced full-text search and AI, ensuring your results are ultra-relevant with semantic depth. It's multimodal, supporting images, videos, and audio, along with being federated, i.e. searching across multiple data sources. And it's developer-friendly. Whether you're building a content-rich website or enterprise application, Search delivers the experience your users expect and deserve. For a limited time, CodeStory users can get 2 months free. Use the promo code CODESTORY, all one word, at checkout. Just go to MaileySearch.com and get started today. That's MEILI search.com. So I'm curious about where scalability comes in here. And you talked about, there's not thousands upon thousands of railroads and you're deploying these sorts of things, but there's also considerations in the acquisitions that you made around deploying them because time to market's important. So I'm curious about, scalability. And scalability can be technology when we think about the elasticity of like cloud computing. That's an aspect of, questions I typically ask, but scalability can also be how you deploy it, how you make it happen, can be people, all those sorts of things. And I'm curious if there were any interesting areas where you had to fight things as you grew and deployed.
I made reference to this earlier with some of our prior vision products. This is something that I think as an industry, and I say the rail industry, I think sometimes we get right and sometimes we struggle with, which is you want to MVP, you want to get products and solutions to customers, to your constituents as fast as possible. But you also have to understand that, as I said earlier, the expectation is that if you're delivering systems, particularly which have some sort of safety element to them, it's not okay to put a product in the ground that it will not be reliable in the long term. And so there's a balance here of prototyping, but then having a gating system around that prototype so that prototypes do not get promoted into production systems without going through a full phase of designing for manufacturing and thinking about long-term reliability. And that sounds very easy, and academically we can all wrap our minds around that. But there's also this element of when you deliver an MVP solution. I remember this prior to my WabTech days. I remember somebody who's now an executive at one of these railroads, and we were trying to solve a particular problem with rail cars moving around in a rail terminal. And we were trying to understand why a piece of that rail car moves when we couldn't understand it. And so somebody literally used electrical tape and a GoPro and attached a GoPro to a rail car. And you start to get results and you get very excited and you're like, we need to do more experimentation here. Before you know it, you have a solution in the ground that really wasn't designed for long-term use. And so I think that when I think about scalability, I think that's the hardest part within rail. Figuring out where the sweet spot is of where innovation turns into industrial design and making sure that you're really respectful about that process while keeping speed in place. It's hard.
As you step out on the balcony, And you look across, all that you've built and acquired and put together and deployed here with kinetics in particular. What are you most proud of?
It's funny. I was talking to somebody last night. If you just Google or put in your favorite AI engine right now, mergers and acquisitions in freight railroads, you'll come up with a bunch of stories about, there have been some press releases about some potential mergers that will create a transcontinental railroad. I am not here to pontificate about whether that will happen or not. But I was talking to somebody who's involved in that process, and I was saying to them, how great is it that if that goes forward, that you have a seat at the table when the nation will be creating the first transcontinental railroad ever? That is something you can tell your grandkids about. And I think on a smaller scale, when I think about the rail industry, so many industries are really ahead of the curve in terms of automation. I think of what Amazon does with their warehouses and distribution centers. And you have this industry, which many of us feel very nostalgic about, and it's ripe with these opportunities, whether it's inspection technologies or automating the movement of trains. And I think that's a privilege to be a part of that, to say, I think that these solutions can make that environment safer and more efficient. And I don't mean to be wax poetic about it, but railroads are so critical to a nation and its growth and servicing its public. And if you can take a step and have a big part of moving that forward, whether it's safety or just more efficient operations. And I just think we're in a very interesting time where technology is moving fast, and I think we have a great opportunity to do that. I think that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would just say is that I've been a part of some really great teams over my career with people who have made significant contributions to this industry, and watching those people develop and move on and having an impact in this industry and being able to say, hey, I was on that team, I was a part of that. Those are the only minutes where I allow myself to think of being proud, but I try not to think back too much, because that'll happen when I retire. And if you think back too much, you're not getting anything done.
Okay, Alan, let's flip the script a little bit. Tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
When I was still at the railroad, we had started to develop our own inspection technologies. And we were so impassioned that we wanted to prove that you could use these technologies to detect defects. And at that time, it was still a bit of a question mark. And I remember meeting with stakeholders who were not part of the technology organization, but knew railroading really well. And we would give status updates, and we would talk about the number of algorithms we were developing, and we would get very deep into the science of what sort of progress was being made. And I remember one of those meetings, one of those rail execs pulled me off to the side and he said, hey, you're thinking about this all wrong. You keep talking about algorithms, and what we need to know is what problems are you solving? And so stop talking about algorithms and tell me that you have, out of 100 different defect cases that we're looking for, how many of those defects you have solved for. And it was earlier in my career, and it was such a reminder of, as engineers or technologists, sometimes we can get lost in our own science. And I was making that mistake. I was so focused on that instead of what is the real problem that I'm solving, and what is the impact to my customer, who in this case was the rail operator. And so it's a lesson I will never forget. And I made the mistake for a while. And I think in that case, I think we lost a little bit of momentum and a little bit of sponsorship, because it started to feel more like a science project than a product. So I'll never forget that.
Okay, Alan, this will be really fun. Tell me what the future looks like for Wabtec, for Kinetics, and for the team. What are you going to go do now?
The two things that are most interesting to me as I look out on the horizon is, number one, at an industry level, we're gathering these insights. We're taking pictures of these rail cars and we're finding defects. And I think that there's a really cool data science project that's coming in which we're taking all these disparate data inputs and we're driving insights that allow us to get even farther on the curve in terms of preventive maintenance and preventing derailments. And so that is connecting the dots of an image I'm taking on a vision system, a reading from a microphone array, understanding of what the average temperature of a certain part of track is and where we pick up on these defects. And this is like the work of statisticians and data scientists, but I think that there's a book of work here that could be groundbreaking. And I'm really excited by that and the next steps on what will come from that. I think the second piece on inspection technologies that is fascinating to me is the introduction of robotics. And so it's one thing to find these defects on locomotives or rail cars. And so then that train arrives at a terminal and you say, great, we had 150 cars on that train and we know that these 5 cars have defects. Taking that to the next step and deploying robotics to perform some of those repairs is really interesting. And the concept of putting robotics in places where humans do inspections today, but it's a rather dangerous kind of environment. I think that this is the next wave of automation. And again, I want to be respectful. I don't think it's necessarily replacing humans, but it's using robots to get in dangerous positions. And you're seeing a little bit of this. I think in Europe, there's been some experimentation around this. And I think that this is the next big wave of inspection technologies. And obviously, there's all these Boston robotics and all these different things that we're seeing in the news. I think this wave is coming and it's going to be super exciting.
Okay, Alan, let's switch to you. Who influences the way that you work? Name a person or many persons or something you look up to and why.
I've been really lucky to have a lot of great mentors over my career that I study and I take the best parts of them and I try to copy them as much as possible. But I would say living within the corporate structure, I take a lot of inspiration from leaders in entrepreneurial and startup cultures. And you can pick any number of names here, some of which have become lightning rods. You think about that term of risk on and what that means, say, in a corporate environment versus in a startup. And I think that in that corporate environment, if we all maybe approached our roles a little bit more with that startup mindset of, I must solve this problem. It is existential to this business. I just get inspired by that. So to the extent I listen to podcasts, I love listening about the startup culture. And I find it so inspirational. And then you and I talked about this earlier, but I can get inspired by John Steinbeck or Jack Kerouac. I try to take inspiration where I can get it from. But yeah, I don't have a single North Star on that. It just changes by the week and day.
Okay, Alan, last question. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young builder, young entrepreneur, young, deployer of a portfolio they just acquired that you have some experience with doing that, and they're jazzed about what they're doing. They can't wait to show it off to the world. What advice do you give those people, having gone down, this road a bit?
I would say the first thing, and I tell it to family members or friends who are about to be new parents, have conviction, have grit, be a sturdy person. The world's changing every day. Things are getting thrown at us that none of us expected. Our CEO says this all the time about there's just certain things that we don't control, and we have to expect that those things are coming our way. And he has a great way of saying it, and I think about that a lot. You've got to be sturdy. And if you're a leader, your team's counting on you to be sturdy. One, I would just say have conviction, have grit. The second thing I would say is now that if you have that conviction, surround yourself with people who will challenge your conviction. I don't need a fan club. I need advisors, but I also need people who will call me and say, hey, Fisher, I think you're thinking of that the wrong way. Hey, Fisher, you think robotics is going to be important? I disagree. I love that. And I love when somebody has the courage to challenge me. I learn a lot from that process. So I think it's really important as leaders that we surround ourselves with people who are willing to call it straight. And then maybe the third thing, and this is I think that this is true if you're a GM or a product leader in a corporate structure or you're a founder. Cash flow is king. You have to always think about what kind of financials you're generating. And it seems like maybe years ago in that zero interest environment, we had a much longer leash on founders and people trying to build long-running technologies and them not showing cash flow for many years. And with the development of AI, startups seem to be getting smaller. You can build more with less. And I think that leash is getting shorter. And certainly in the corporate environment, you feel some of this as well. So I just think if you ever take your eye off of your burn rate, your cash flow, understanding your end market, your profit pools, as a leader, you're just doing your team a disservice, because at the end of the day, that's what you're here for, right? You're here to build a viable business that can support itself and hopefully seed off future investments.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. Well, Alan, thank you for being on the show today. And thank you for telling the creation story around the Kinetics inspection technology portfolio within Wabtec. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Noah. I really appreciate it.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Shopify is a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business and sell more with less effort thanks to the Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redcircle, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redcircle now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/redcircle.